Hello, this is Truth Be Told Transformation, and I'm your host, Bonnie Burkert, here to share tools for transformation to live your highest truth. So, in exploring our highest truth, it's really what is real to you. And the conversation about reincarnation is always a very interesting one. How do you prove it, people might ask? And yet I know I've had some personal experiences that have revealed major ahas around a past life regression that would inform perhaps other experiences, people, things like that. So I've invited to the show today special guests who are experienced in past life regression and knowledgeable about reincarnation. Dave and Carla. Hi.
Hi.
Thanks so much
Hi,
for
Bonnie.
joining
Great
us.
to be on.
Yeah, thank you so much. So you've written several books about this, but before we start to talk about it, let me just ask, how did you come to past life regression work? Did you go to a session initially that had a great reveal for you?
Actually, no, Bonnie. We had a personal experience that started during meditation. After that, we went for some training. What happened originally is really part of our story. That's the interesting part. Back in 2014, I'm a physician. We had to start electronic medical records. I became incredibly tired, burned out. Carla would say grouchy, difficult to talk to, all those kind of things. And Carla came up one day and said, we've got to do something with you.
So I offered me calling a counselor for him or trying meditation. And of course, I shouldn't say this, but like most men, of course, he didn't want to go to a counselor. He said he would try meditation. So we decided to do it as an office. And we started in the morning before the patients came in. The first day we had all of the office, second day, all of the office. The third day, the girl said, we'll do it from home. So Dave and I did it for about 35 minutes before the patients came in. And as we heard them come in, we went to our adjoining offices and Dave came up behind me and said, Carla, I know you'll think I'm crazy, but I think I was just talking to your mother. Well, of course, this caught my attention because my mother had passed away 18 years before and he had never met her. So
it was very interesting. I thought it was strange, but so I went on to tell Carla. She was jovial, happy, talking to me, and she kept showing me this specific shoe. And Carla said, well, that gets my attention.
So I went to the computer and I Googled ballroom dancing shoes, and about 60 or 70 pair popped up on the screen. And I said, which shoe? And he pointed to the exact shoe that my mother had worn her entire life. It was a short pump, open-toed sandal. She wore it for ballroom dancing and to church or to dress up. And so that was kind of an aha moment, because how could he possibly have gotten that, first of all? And second of all, why was my mother talking to him? Because I was sitting there too.
Unbelievable. That is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So, Bonnie, that we were pretty excited. I thought maybe I was crazy because I was raised Catholic and this wasn't possible. And we kept meditating as much as we could. Carla and her sister kept saying, well, do it again. Talk to mom. Tell us what's going on. Those kind of things. And we kept seeing various things. Every once in a while, Carla's mother would jump in again. During meditation, I started to get visions of various things.
He would see faces and different places that he had not been, to his knowledge, objects. And we just started writing everything down because we didn't know what any of it meant.
And so there did become a day when another woman spoke to me, and she told me her name was Isabella, and she told me she was my spirit guide and had been with me for 6,000 years through all of my lives. Again, I thought, I've lost my mind. I don't know what this has to do with anything. When Carla's mother was speaking to me, I went back into the Bible and, I found Jesus talking to Isaiah and Moses, and they were both dead, and he was transfigured up on a mountain. I found Old Testament stuff where Saul was talking to dead people. But so I thought, so maybe that rule is really not out there. Maybe there's something else that's possible, and meditation could open you up. Well, but then this thing with Isabella was like, okay, I don't even know what this means. And I really wasn't convinced that I wasn't losing it, that the stress in the office was pushing me over the edge. But we kept meditating. And then there was another day, and I had this memory. And I was standing in an alley, and it was dark, and there was a light up in the corner. And I looked across the alley, and there was Carla standing there. Now, I knew it was Carla, but it didn't look exactly like Carla. And suddenly, I saw two large flashes. And I heard a big, large bang, and I realized I was shot in the chest, was thrown on the ground, and was dying, bleeding to death. We kept meditating on this because I told Carla, I don't know what this means. And then next day, while meditating again, I got more of the story, but it was the story before that day. And it was a story where I was getting in this very old looking car. When I say old, 1920s, 30s car, driving and pulling up in front of Ashland Auditorium in Chicago, Illinois. And I knew I was going to a wedding that day on December 10th, 1925.
Unreal.
January 10th, 1925. Wow. And I was going into this wedding, and I ran up into Ashland Auditorium, and there was this big makeshift church inside, and people were filling it up. And I sat on the side where the groom's people would sit. And suddenly, this woman came out, and it was the woman I had saw in the alley. And she was starting to sing the Ave Maria, and it was absolutely beautiful. And I had to meet her. So at the reception, I searched everywhere to find her. I found her. I tried to talk to her. I tried to get her to dance with me. She kept pushing me away. And finally, she said yes. And we went out on the dance floor, and we danced. And I had to ask her out for breakfast the next day. And she tried to argue with me there too. But finally, as she was walking off the dance floor, she turned around and said, well, maybe I'll meet you at Marino's at 10. I go home, I go to sleep, I get up, I get dressed, I go to Marino's, and I sit in this little diner, and she walks in, but she's not dressed up this time. And she's just in a wool comfortable coat, and she sits down, and we eat breakfast, and we go for a walk along the Chicago coastline. We met at a wedding of a man named Angelo. We walked along the Chicago coastline, and she told me her name was Ruby Donaldson. She was born in Bullock, Georgia, that she moved to Chicago to become a singer, dancer, and a dressmaker. Her parents' names were James and Anna Donaldson. And I was like telling Carla all of this, and I realized in the alley she was dressed with a fringed skirt. And Carla took this information and went out on a quest.
Well, I figured it wasn't that long ago. I should be able to find something on it. So I got onto Ancestry.com, and I did indeed find Ruby Donaldson, born in 1904, to James and Anna Donaldson, one of 11 children. There were actually pictures of some of the family members and my parents. And then I got onto old newspapers in Chicago, and I found the wedding to a man named Angelo Genna to Lucille Spinola, January the 10th, 1925 at Ashland Auditorium. So I had some corroborating information to give to Dave, and I said, you're not crazy, because I found this and it has to be accurate. You're not imagining it. We had no idea who Angelo Genna was. He was the head mobster before Al Capone in Chicago.
Okay. And he owned a speakeasy named DeAndre's, and Ruby Donaldson was employed there.
The plot thickens.
Mm-hmm.
My goodness. So, okay, so further takeaways.
Further takeaways, we started doing some research on reincarnation, found a lot of religious references and various things across many different types of religions, including Christianity, Judaism, um, a, a sort of branch, I'm going to say, off of Muslims that's called Druze, certainly Hindus, Buddhists, and found out 33% of the world believes in it. Even though I was a Catholic and Carla was Catholic, we didn't believe that.
Mm-hmm.
It was something that was there to start to hang on to. We found a bunch of research done at the University of Virginia Department of Perceptual Studies by Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker, where they had been interviewing kids since 1950, cataloging spontaneous memories of kids that seemed to be able to remember things up to 3, 4, sometimes 5 years old.
Yeah.
And with the research, they've got about 2,500 cases where they call them verified, where they have enough facts and issues. Carla had read a book by Dr. Weiss, Brian Weiss, years before.
Many books.
And she said, you've got to read this book because he does past life regression. So we finally did train with Dr. Weiss at the Omega Institute in New York.
What a treat.
That was after we had written our second book, which was Hell No Reincarnation. The first book, well, all of our books, Dave does not get his information by regression. He gets it from actually going to that life and conversing with his spirit guide, Isabella. The past life regression, although we did go and train with Dr. and Mrs. Weiss, we don't do it other than with friends and family. We just wanted to do it and be in an arena with people that have had similar experiences. So we were one of 125 or 50 people from all over the world that had such experiences. So it was nice to be in a room with people that understood what was going on with us. So we didn't feel like we were cracking up. There were a lot of other people cracking up. So
some of the other takeaways, Bonnie, these are the things that we have learned through all of this. Certainly, people that are interested and want to get a past life regression, they should do it. It's a great experience. They will heal some things that may have occurred in the past. They'll learn some other things about themselves. All of those things are really good. Some of the other things that we've learned is that you travel in soul groups. We like to call them either family mates or karmic mates. So if you interact with somebody in one life, you're going to interact with them in another, either because they're like family and they help you, or they're there to test you, and we call those karmic mates. So it's not surprising when you meet someone on the street and you say, gee, it seems like I've known you forever. During this experience, I found 42 past lives. Carla has 34 past lives, and we've shared 29 of them together.
That is amazing. That is incredible.
In all capacities. I've been his mother. I've been his sister. I've been his schoolmate. I've been his queen many times over and over and over again. Although sometimes in this life, I feel like his mother.
Yes.
Almost every day his queen, I'm sure.
Yeah.
She is absolutely
Let's be clear
every
about
time. So it starts to become interesting when you start looking at these things. And the other thing we found, Bonnie, is since we have all of these lives mapped out, because we wrote about many of them in our first book, some of them in our second book, some in the third book, and we wrote kind of a longer book about one of the lives, we've started to watch for patterns. And those patterns became really interesting. And then Isabella came in and tried to fill in some parts of these patterns. Some of the patterns that were interesting is, we had a life as a slave and a life as a slave owner. We had a series of lives, one where we were Viking attacking the Scottish coast Then we were Scottish fighting the English, then English fighting the Scottish. And then again, Carla was of Viking descent and married into the Scottish family, English royalty.
Mhm.
And so when you look at that, you start to realize at times we were actually fighting ourselves on the opposite sides of the same war.
And we've all been kings and queens, saints and sinners, black, white. Some people have been male and female. It's not the case with Dave and I. Apparently, we can just barely handle being this gender.
I guess.
But past lives are funny. They're interesting. But Isabella told us in our first book, we talk about the 5 simple rules. And if you want to get off this karmic wheel, you just need to remember with every choice and decision you make in life, ask yourself, is it out of conceit, jealousy, selfishness, and unforgiveness? Or are we making all choices and decisions out of love and compassion? That's why we repeat. That's why we come back in all these different capacities to learn these things. If we don't walk in everybody's shoes, how else can we understand them and truly learn compassion?
That's beautiful. I appreciate that. That's so important. And I think, you mentioned karmic wheel. I think that that's a concept that we could elaborate on a little bit, because my introduction to reincarnation would have been probably the Hare Krishnas. I think they had an event and I walked by, and they map it out for you. They show you, that's their belief, right? And so that was my exposure to Eastern thoughts around that. And I mean, I had no problem with it, but I didn't really think too much about it. And it's interesting, and this dates me, but I moved to New York in '86, and then the New Age, a lot was really burgeoning at that time. There were a lot of crystal shops opening up. And one of the first group meditations that I ever, probably even meditating that I had done, because I had done yoga, but I don't remember the meditation part of yoga class back in the early '80s. And
When you were 12.
yeah, it was a long time
Mhm.
ago. And probably the meditation was, probably, I don't know, running or something like that. But I remember being in Manhattan, some New Age store, and doing a past life regression class.
Mm.
And I didn't really know what that was. And when you talk about past life regression, I don't know, this is how naive I was. I wasn't necessarily defaulting into reincarnation and, just sort of what that could be. And I had a big, I used this term before, but there was a real revelation that came through. And I was thinking the whole time, and I want to talk to you also about how you meditate, because I was lying down. I remember lying out and just thinking, I'm not doing this right. I'm getting nothing. But I did get something. And it really helped me in a relationship I was in at the time, because I was struggling. This was a person I didn't want to be with, but he was being so nice to me. And so I didn't want to hurt him and leave. But I saw that he was super mean to me in past lives. So it was his chance to make it up to me in this life.
Correct.
Now, I was not making this up. I was not looking for this. I did not put I wasn't even thinking about, I was very new to all of this kind of thought. And so it really helped me shift my issue around that relationship, and which I was able to leave more easily, because I saw it was karmic. He needed to make up.
There was, and it may have been the karmic part for you, may have been saying, no, this isn't right for me, and taking control of your own life.
Okay. And I'm feeling it right now as we talk about it. I'm bringing it all right back in the here and now. So thank you. That is my true blessing of being able to talk with wise people like yourselves.
So Bonnie, much like you're talking about, and this is why you can relate to some even real life situations. Imagine that you're an alcoholic and you have a son and you've not been good to him, and your son becomes an alcoholic, and in your next incarnation, you return as his son. so that you have to experience what it's like to have an alcoholic father. And then you start to realize that the wheel keeps continuing until someone makes the choice to break the cycle.
Okay.
And it works in families that have abuse issues, in families that have, alcoholic issues. If maybe in your life at one time, Bonnie, this guy in a past life was not good to you, you get that syndrome where you can't leave, but you keep putting up with being treated poorly. And in this life, you finally said, even though he's not treating me poorly, he's still not right for me. And I have to be strong enough to say he's not right for me.
Yeah.
Bonnie, in this life, my first husband was Angelo Jenna, my boss as Ruby Donaldson. He was very mean to me. He was very abusive to me. And in this life, he was the same way. But in this life, I walked away and said, that's it. You can't own me.
So this is how we can learn. And this is all part, and I think it's interesting because a lot of people throw the term karma around, maybe not fully aware, not necessarily wrong, but not as fine-tuned as really what it's meant to mean. Because a lot of people think it's very specifically cause and effect. And
It's
you
not punishment directly, it's a learning pathway.
It's potential.
Okay.
To grow.
Excellent. Well said. Yeah, very, very well said. So there's so much going on here that we're talking about. It's all very, very interesting, and thanks for letting me share one of my own anecdotes about it. So okay, I want to ask you about, this is book number 2, Hell No, Reincarnation.
Sure.
So tell us a little bit about that one, because I think it's very interesting to talk about your path coming to an openness to this from as people that were you both Catholics?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Bonnie, if you want to take it this way, we sort of call Hell No Reincarnation our coming to grips with
A
reconciliation of being raised Catholic in this.
And then our experience.
And so a large part of it included some research on religion. I'm going to give you a couple little short things since it's a 40-minute show. The first thing you should do is realize that in Judaism, reincarnation has always been a tenet. The Kabbalists are all involved in it still, in the thought. They have a thought in Judaism that you have 613 lessons or commandments that you have to do, and that if you don't finish them in a life, that of course you'll come back until you complete them all. That's their basic tenet. And if you look at the Old Testament, you start to realize that the God that everybody thinks is going to punish us and send us to hell, if you look at the examples even in the Old Testament, we have God making a covenant with Adam, and he fails. God makes a covenant with the Jewish people again through Abraham, and they fail. Then through Moses, and they fail, and then through King David, and they fail. God never once says, well, they failed. That's it. They're all going to hell. I give up. It's never happened in the Old Testament. Then you start reading Old Testament issues, trying to get the actual language and what it meant in Hebrew and those kinds of translations. And you realize the book of Leviticus starts to talk about the word kata. That's the Hebrew word. In English, it's sin. It's actually an Aramaic and Hebrew word, but it means fail to reach your goal. So in Leviticus, if you don't reach your goal, you must atone until you do.
Sounds like reincarnation.
Sounds like reincarnation to me if you read this.
Yeah.
If you start to look now, for any of your Christian listeners, I don't mean this to be offensive, so I'm going to apologize. But if you look at the book of Leviticus, sacrifice is never used to forgive sin unless it's an unintentional sin. Sacrifice is to clean the space so that God can come back in. So you sacrifice an animal to clean the altar so that God can come back into the altar. If you have a ritual sin, so that you, like if you were an undertaker and you took care of the dead, you have to give a sacrifice to clean yourself because dead people are dirty. And then you had to clean yourself before you could go back to the altar again. So that's really an unintentional sin. Blood was bad, so they thought if women were having their menstrual period, they had to sacrifice an animal so they could come back to the altar. So blood is always to clean the space. It's not a sacrifice to forgive sin.
I see. Okay.
So I don't want to offend anybody there.
Yeah.
But if you keep going through this, then you start to realize that one of the earliest church fathers was Origen of Alexandria in 200 AD. He still writes that reincarnation and transmigration of the soul, and that the soul exists before life and after your life, is the doctrine of the church.
Yeah.
And his writing is literally, he's excommunicated from the church 200 years later because they say his writings were heretic, even though he wrote all of the other things, including many of which are part of the canonical parts in the Bible and those kind of things. So there's some church issues there that are interesting.
Yes, always in lots of different in lots of different studies and surveys, indeed. But
and so as we've talked to Isabella says, in each life you're born as a child, you literally must be able to overcome those things that will be a threat to you. And so you are born with the ability to, if you want to call it, the ability to sin, the ability to be selfish, the ability to do those things, because you have to watch out for food and your survival. And we've really, as a species, evolved beyond that now. So as evolving beyond the need for basic survival, as long as our parents love us and take care of us, we can overcome those desires because really the world has all it needs. I know people disagree with this when you start to say this, but we have a world that's currently has the least poverty, the least violence of any time in world history.
Incredible.
And so as a society, we're evolving through all of these stages. And so we can really avoid selfishness and jealousy and unforgiveness, including forgiving yourself. I'd like to throw that in because that's part of the same karma.
Oh, I agree, very much so. Well, that's a beautiful overarching message. And certainly, I think with the studies that you're doing, ultimately coming to that revelation for us, for yourselves and for us, about what this is all about. Because, I've often heard Marianne Williamson had a great quote. She said, all this personal development work without being applied to the community is ultimately narcissism.
Yes, I love
Great
that.
quote.
And I may not have, that's maybe not word for word, but I think it's a really, really important message. And so I appreciate you have gone far beyond to have an understanding of these possibilities and the depth of experience, right, of earthly experience. But you're refining it with your books, through your writings, through to really a right way to live, a happy way to live life.
Happy, for sure. And it's easier than you think if you just stop yourself with every decision or action. Just stop and ask yourself, am I being conceited? Am I being jealous? Am I being selfish? Am I being unforgiving? And that will stop you. I do it all the time with texts. You write a text and it sounds like, oh, I better back that up. But, we've been here over 6,000 years. We're all still learning. We're all in the same school.
Incredible. Well, and think about how it all started. So may I ask, since I'd like to share tools for transformation,
Sure.
I'd like to ask, let's talk a little bit about the early meditation and how you started coming to this, and how our listeners could maybe be open to messages from the beyond. I like to say to that higher consciousness, and not be scared of messages coming through, and pay attention to that, to what they might be, as you were able to do so for yourself.
First of all, you have everything you need, which is yourself, to meditate. There isn't a right or wrong way. When we taught meditation at the university, we played calm music, closed our eyes, sitting in a chair that we're not too comfortable in. If you get too comfortable, you're going to sleep.
True. Yeah.
The best time for us to meditate is when we wake up in the morning. You're already rested. If you can just take 20 minutes in the morning, quiet your mind, turn off the devices. It takes practice. It's not something, you're very lucky, Dave's very lucky, but for me, I still have to quiet my mind, and it takes time, it takes practice. You have to do it just like you would working out, taking a shower, daily, religiously, and just shut everything off. Concentrate on your breath. If you get a thought, breathe deeper, concentrate on the breathing, count to yourself whatever you need to do. You may get to the point where you start to see colors. Those are your angels. You may get to the point where you see pictures. If they're right in front, it's probably a past life. If it's on the left side, they might be your angels and your spirit guides or people that have passed over. If it's on the right side, it could be people that are waiting to reincarnate once again. If you have fears because of religious upbringing or whatever the case may be, ask for a gatekeeper. Many of us have a gatekeeper, and that is a lot of times somebody that was in our life in one of our past lives, and they simply keep the negativity away from you. So you shouldn't have any fear about meditating or shutting off your brain. How else can the spirit world reach you and help you?
And the other thing, Bonnie, I always love to tell people a couple other things about meditation. If you do the medical research on it, you'll realize that meditation actually does lower your blood pressure. It lowers your blood sugar. It actually lowers your stress hormone, cortisol. I like to give people this example because I think it matters to people when they hear this. The first year that we meditated, I lost 2 pounds a week for a year, and was 104 pounds lighter.
Oh my gosh.
Because the stress of all the things that were happening in work and everything else had just got everything out of control.
And wanting to be your best self.
And that's part of meditating too, is wanting to be your best self. And then you also realize that if you do the research, you find out that during meditation, alpha and theta waves increase in your brain, which is part of your memory. Those waves go up when you have memory. You realize that dopamine and serotonin increase in the brain while you're meditating, which are the antidepressant medications that we give, but they're normal occurring in your brain. So when you start to do that, you start to think, why doesn't everybody spend 20 or 30 minutes every day in quiet reflection and meditation? Depression would go down, anxiety goes down.
You'd sleep better.
You sleep better. Actually, melatonin, natural melatonin does increase. And so you start to find that that state starts to attach physical experiences and spiritual experiences together. And when you start to do that, your body becomes healthier.
I mean, indeed, the fact that you just naturally, that the weight fell off of you naturally is interesting.
And with walking, because he wanted to be his better self.
Correct.
Well, right. And so the energy, and just for everybody's information, if you hadn't read the bio, Dave is a doctor. And so, I mean, this is, you're informed. You're watching this from a medical standpoint as well. This isn't not only just a survey of through training at the Omega Institute. You're right. Watching.
And your spirit guides are only going to let you see what you need to see. They'll show you something because it was a happy time, or they may show you something that triggers other things. And that might happen because, like in your case, Bonnie, it was something for you to pay attention to. If you're having horrible experiences or visions or whatever, don't think it's the little red devil jumping in. It could be you had a horrible experience in one of your past lives. We all have. I mean, I've been poisoned. I've been, I fell down steps and broke my neck. I've been tortured. I've been starved. We've all been, because if you go back in history, that was pretty normal behavior. And the same with Dave. So don't be at all surprised if you have some of these. Just remember, we're infinite souls. That was then, it's not now.
Correct. And Bonnie, this is the other thing. You'll talk to people who are well knowledged on past life regression and those kind of things. And some of them have this theory that we're here just for the experience and to have fun. But the reality is we're here to grow and change. There's a purpose. And this is something else, because during this experience, I've become what I would call more religious, not as in a religion, but more respectful of God, creator, Tao, source, whatever you want to call that ultimate
intelligent designer,
the divine, if you want to call it that. It becomes more important because you realize that the goal is that we started from that, and our goal is to grow through this with enough experience that literally we can understand what love is and return back to, as part of that spark, into that original again. And you have to start to respect that. When you start looking at the science behind all of the things that we've discovered in the reincarnation, we found that, we're here to overcome. Well, the reality is, what doesn't kill you does make you stronger. You should face adversity, because when you overcome adversity, you're better, you're stronger, you're more successful, you feel more successful, you start to grow. And if it takes 42 lives to get to the point where you're growing enough, I'm really okay with that.
And remember, it's not what happens to us in life. It's how we choose to handle it.
Right on.
That's where the growth is.
Well, you two have really, I know there's another book called The Manual. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that in our final moments? There's some beautiful wisdom there. Thank you so much. And I certainly don't want to shortchange all the different, what's the word I want to say? It's just like you have really come to a great awareness on a depth of awareness on a lot of different levels. So please tell us a little bit about the manual, because I think that we talk about angels in that one as well. And
correct.
So please give us some info on that too.
My favorite thing during all the years that I've known Carla in this life, not in the other ones, every time she said something that she says, I don't know what to do, or I think I didn't do that as well as I could have, she used to say, I never got the manual. And so the title of the third book is The Manual, because it has it's
the how-to book. It's how we're made.
Yeah. Okay.
And a way to self-evaluate is in that book too.
Fabulous.
And it starts a little bit with astrological signs. Not that the moon and the stars actually affect us, but we're born into a time frame that makes us certain ways.
Because our astrological signs are tied to our angel, which is tied to our karma. So there's a color chart in the manual that breaks that down. For instance, Dave and I both fall under the yellow angel of Mariel, which is selfishness. When we heard that, Dave's a Pisces, I'm an Aquarian, we thought, well, we're not selfish. That's not the point. We were selfish in the past. As Ruby and JJ, we only thought about ourselves getting together, having a really good time. A lot of people were killed and terrible things happened because of our relationship. So in this life, the intelligent designer was ever so gracious to give us this angel to help us and remind us.
And so if you look in the manual, you will at least find a description of various archetypes, traits, modifiers to those traits, and the way that your body is put together. And if you start to read through and you look at your astrological sign, and we've broken some of the things down, like your fears is in certain astrological signs and those kind of things. If you look at that, you can figure out what you need to start to try to overcome.
Excellent. Very well
And
put. And I
so
think
that's
that,
what,
and I that was that was going to be like an overarching question for me, that I had for you. Why study our past lives? Why? What do we get from that? And I think that you've really come up with many different possibilities of how we can learn and grow and transform. Word of the show, right? The transformation that can come
absolutely,
from
the
that.
transformation. And it is
Yes.
about growing. And Bonnie, if you needed to, for those listeners that don't even want to buy into all of this, you could look at this as at least look at the history and the life and the lessons of the past.
Okay. Right.
Okay, whether it's our personal ones or the whole universe and the world, you don't look at the lessons of the past, how and you're going to repeat them. That doesn't make any sense.
Not in judgment also either, right? Just to clear. Like, oh,
Yes.
we use the word, we talked about the clearing. Fascinating. All right, everyone. Well, please look up Dave and Carla and all their different work. Information about their books are listed on the YouTube show information and description. And thank you both. This has really been very revealing, and I really appreciate the chance to kind of look back, and I feel greatly challenged to explore further.
Thanks for having us, Bonnie.
Yep, it was a pleasure, Bonnie. Take care.
Cheers. Much appreciate you listening, everyone. This has been Truth Be Told Transformation. Don't forget that Tony Sweet is on every Friday live at 3 p.m. Pacific. And Robert Hensley also has the Minuteman Report live on Mondays at 3 p.m. Be sure to mark your calendars for April 1st, 2023 for our very first Parapod Fest. You can find parapodfestival.com for more details on tickets and how to participate in Santa Clarita, California, which is really close to us here in Burbank. We really appreciate every listen, every like, every share. Thanks. Get in touch with us. Let us know how you're doing out there. And until the next time, you stay well, believe, and shine on.